Looks like we're live. Are we live? Okay, nice, nice. It's working. There's just like a 15-second delay. I can live with that. Okay. So anyone watching this stream right now, thanks for watching. I know I'm competing with a lot of other major,
are we live?
Major high budget
Nice
productions on this website right now.
There's just like a
15-second delay. Nonetheless, the information that I'm sharing here is something that you're not going to hear. So anyone watching this stream right now, thanks for watching. These other, I know I'm competing with a lot of other major downing any other channels by any stretch. I'm just saying it's not the same news, the same complaints. I mean, I give them all credit. I appreciate all, and I listen to all of them. I'm just saying this is a whole different different spectrum. This is something I want to get out there. I've been trying very hard to get exposure to this topic here, which has been around for a while, but it's not mainstream. So we can start basically with this quote right here. So we have Republican government, and this is not about Republican versus Democrat. This is a constitutional republic. So a Republican government in Black's Law Dictionary. What is it? One in which the powers of sovereignty are vested in the people and are exercised by the people either directly or through representatives chosen by the people. Okay, so one of the first things I learned in this subject is people versus citizen. Okay, a citizen of the United States is a person who is born or naturalized in this country and who is subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So how I was taught this, a citizen is basically a freed slave. It is not the same thing as one of the people as contemplated in the preamble of the Constitution. A citizen, as I just said, is a subject of the jurisdiction. And I found a very interesting site recently. After knowing this stuff for quite some time, I found a very interesting site, and it said Chief Justice Marshall has said that an exercise of jurisdiction is an exercise of sovereignty. So that lays it out right there. The words are basically interchangeable. So when you're talking about a subject of the jurisdiction, you're talking about a subject of the sovereignty. So as we know, many of us know, the whole concept behind the satanic religion that these entities operate in accordance with is inversion. Everything is inverted. Everything is upside down. The gaslighting, the projection, the men can have babies, the murder of logic, as some folks have called it. So the people created the government, and the government is comprised of our agents. The government officials are our agents. So, they'd like us to believe that through various adhesion contracts, driver's licenses, social security cards, business licenses, driver's licenses, that we have signed our sovereignty away. They basically want us to believe that the Constitution itself was an adhesion contract where we just gave all of our sovereign powers right back over to our rulers, our would-be rulers, when the whole point of this country was to break away from the sovereignty and government. And I'll put the site that I like the most. Well, there's quite a few actually, but there's one of the ones I like the most is Poindexter versus Greenhow from the U.S. Supreme Court. Has a few really good sites in that case, and one of the things it goes into has to do with that concept. There's a couple others too, and it's basically our revolution and our Constitution fractured the foundations or shattered the foundations of sovereignty and government, and prevented against their baneful influence henceforth and forever. However, We have all these entities going around calling themselves His Excellency and Her Excellency, these governors. If you never knew that, that's their official title. And it says right in the Constitution explicitly that no titles of nobility, it's like no bills of attainder, no post facto law, and no titles of nobility shall be granted in government. However, they treat us as if they are our kings, our rulers, the sovereignty, and we are their subjects to be, done however they choose. They wipe their asses with the Constitution every day. They ignore even their own statutes. You can see that in so many cases. It's basically comes down to they have a gun, and so anything you touch on the concepts of U.S. Supreme Court cases, that talk about that traveling is a right, not a privilege granted to us by our would-be sovereign masters, and they'll immediately look at you like you're crazy and say, you think you're a sovereign citizen. Oh my God, you're insane. And once again, I'll return your attention back to the screen here. In the simple definition of a republican government, it is the foundational principle of our country, is that the people are sovereign, and we did this to get away from sovereignty in government. So how do we exercise our powers directly? As many of us know, the idea of a violent revolution has a lot of implications, a lot of connotations. The old saying goes that the hand that crushes the tyrant's head becomes the tyrant in his stead. So I've been saying for years, long before I learned this stuff, that a real change in the world has to be accompanied by a shift in consciousness. If you ever heard of the 100th monkey phenomenon, like Deepak Chopra, spiritual, quantum physics, and I mean, we can tie religion into it, but it comes down to a quantum shift in the collective consciousness, to where we all collectively kind of wake up. I've heard the term Great Awakening thrown around the last few years. It's all on the same level, but it starts with energetic, spiritual, change. Anyway, so how do we exercise these powers directly, without threatening, militia action, which has landed many people in prison, for daring to threaten the master, the magistrate, the judges and them, in the exercise of their untouchable, unaccountable, positions, allegedly. So this is stuff that you're going to have to restructure. It's a bit of an awakening, a bit of a matrix awakening to start to understand this stuff. So if you look up the definition of a court in Black's Law Dictionary, does anyone know what a court is? Most attorneys have no idea. Most people don't know what a court is. So this is the website here. Sorry, I have the builder open, but this is the website, Civics.org. The Magi is for the spiritual aspect. It's the first tarot card, and it kind of plays into like the Magna Carta. So I made it Magi Carta, Civics for the Magna Carta, and the Civics is the study of personal rights, the study of, the sovereignty, the common law. If anybody watched that video recently, I'm going to touch this real quick, where Senator John Kennedy interviewed someone, and he was talking about these repugnant, insidious, treacherous, despotic actions of folks like Boasberg, who have issued these universal injunctions. And I almost want to pull that video up. John Kennedy asked the man, he said, is there any basis for these universal injunctions that affect everyone in government in statute? And the gentleman here said, no, there isn't. Or he actually said, no, I don't know of one. And Kennedy said, there is no basis. Is there any? He admitted, no, there's no basis. And then Kennedy says, is there any basis in U.S. Supreme Court opinions? And he said, no, I don't know of any. He said, so there are none. He said, no, there are none. And then he asked him a very, very prudent question, which really sparked my interest. Like that's the whole foundation of what we're working with here, common law versus statutes, the real law of the land, as originated in the Magna Carta. That's where due process originated, the idea of the law of the land. And the statutes are not the law of the land. There's an American jurisprudence citation, I think it's right here on the front page of the website, or the citations page, from where it says, the common misconception is that any statute passed by by the legislature constitutes the law of the land. And that is not the case at all. So anyway, so and then, like I said, the third question that Mr. Kennedy asked this gentleman here is there any basis for these universal injunctions in the common law upon which our system of law is based? And just him saying that was so, like I said, was very powerful, very awesome. This guy's apparently a pretty good guy. I don't know much about him, but that was amazing that he put that right out there on the national TV like that. And the guy said, "Oh, I haven't gone back that far," and he said, "I have." But anyway, just the fact that he mentioned that was really good. But anyway, so we want to know here. I'm going to come here to the front page of the website. This is all free at this point. It's all free, and most of it's going to stay free. I might incorporate some type of way to get funding or a donation button or something. But at this point, it's all free. This is the website, and I'm looking for Black's Law Dictionary 4th edition. The one I pulled before was the 5th edition. Anything newer than that has been totally tainted. They have removed the definitions that are pertinent to the real law and replaced it all with corporate policy. Let's see here. I can tell you off the top of my head what it is, but right there. Yep, international law. No, that's not it. So the definition of a court, okay, is the person and suit of the sovereign. That is what a court is. Okay, the person and suit of the sovereign. So I'm not sure why it's right here under legislation. This is exactly what it says in the definition of a court in Black's Law Dictionary 4th edition. That I find interesting that popped up in the search area. I should have that already prepared. Anyway, that's what it says. There we go. That is it. Okay, that is the definition of a court right there, and it can be found elsewhere. Other dictionaries have similar definitions, but that's the idea. So the idea of a court comes from the idea of the king or the queen, and they have their court. All we've been taught all of our lives is that it's some government official who makes these decisions, and we're all subject to what they say. And it's a deep subject. It's not just really cut and dry. It takes a lot of research, so you want to make sure you study well before you attempt any of these actions that I'm leading up to here. If you actually do injure someone, or hurt someone, then they can lawfully obtain jurisdiction over you. But as far as all this unconstitutional nonsense, trying to take control of our ownership of our children, of our offspring, etc., etc., if they come at you with these actions, they're exceeding their jurisdiction. So let me just stay on point here. So one of the next things that we'll find after number 1, what is a republic? Okay, the people are sovereign and exercise their powers directly or through representatives. And what is a court? The person and suit of the sovereign. Okay. Now the Magna Carta in Article 34 says, henceforth the writ which is called precipe shall not be served on anyone for any holding so as to cause a free man to lose his court. Okay? Is that any questions? So the court of record is probably one of the, maybe the 4th, maybe the 3rd, however you want to look at that, prongs in the concept here. And a court of record is defined as one where the tribunal is independent of the magistrate. And secondly, it is one where it is proceeding according to the course of the common law. So as soon as you lay out the venue and who you are in the beginning of your action, when you take an action against one of these people, and it's an action. A suit is in equity, an action is at law. So you could say sue. That's really not accurate. So as soon as you do so, you have defined that you're one of the people. You don't have to say you're sovereign. Just saying you're one of the people sets up who you are. And in this court of record, okay, you can claim the following. And the first cause of action is always they exceeded their jurisdiction. And there's all kinds of case law you can find that shows that when jurisdiction is challenged, they must prove jurisdiction before they can proceed. Now, of course, they're going to look at you like, like you're out of your mind, because they have the system, and they have, like I said, because they have a gun, and because they're so used to just tricking people into believing that they are a 14th Amendment citizen who has civil privileges, not one of the people who is, one of the founders of this country, or one of the owners of this country, basically. So I kind of outlined that here. The Constitution contains nothing that would diminish our power. We never gave up our right to decree law in the future. We decreed the Constitution, and we, the people of the United States, ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So that's also different entities there. The United States and the United States of America are two different entities. Just one thing to take note of there. The wording is very important. One word can make a huge difference in your paperwork. So we talk about the Republic, and the people retain all the powers. Now the interesting thing here, and I want to just touch on this because I have a very critical mind, and to spot contradictions, and to say that we're citing case law, but in reality the case law is just a reference point, because when you're one of the people, you decree the law. Okay, I'm going to come back to the website real quick here, and on the citations page, it is right here. American Banana Company versus United Fruit Company. These sites have all been checked thoroughly by me. I'm going to tell you right now, there are many websites out there that touch on these type of topics of sovereignty that have sites that are not accurate. Now, I'm not trying to bash anybody. I'm just saying be very cautious. I was taught early on, always double check your sites. Don't even trust yourself. So all these sites have been checked and double checked by me on websites like Justia and Case Text, etc. On reputable sites that have this case law. So, right here, the very meaning of sovereignty is that the decree of the sovereign makes law. Okay, so once again, we are the people, the ones who created the Constitution in the first place. And yes, we have delegated some of our powers to the legislature, to the judicial, executive, and legislative branches, etc. However, they want us, as I said, to believe that we assign all of our sovereign rights away, and that basically the people in their sovereign power have decreed that they are now the subjects of their agents. These filthy GALs, and you name it. I mean, if you're following anything happening recently, this is a big one I'm going to touch on with the children thing. They're trying to take folks' kids away. Not trying to, they are. For refusing to have their 9-month-old injected with some whatever mRNA clot shot they decide to try to mandate on you. Okay, they basically murder your baby, potentially, allegedly, with with one of these shots. I don't really care about the allegedly thing. They want to they want to take me to court and prove that the shots are not killing people. Bring it right on. Yeah, they stole their children, and then there's the Kelly Loving Act out of Colorado. If you haven't heard of that one yet, where if your little child decides, hey Papa, hey Mama, I think I want to be a boy instead of a girl, at a tender young age, and you misgender your kid, or they call it dead naming. I'm telling you again, the inversion. Dead naming is like treating us like a dead thing lost at sea. Like basically calling us the all caps name, presuming that we're an artificial person, and if we don't object in the proper way, we agree. But they're going to say that you're dead naming your precious little child if you call them the gender they actually are. I'm not a biologist, but and instead of whatever they decide one day, they're going to have a little silly little idea as a small child. And so that's the Kelly Loving Act, and they will now try to steal your children away from you, and bring them somewhere where people can have their way with them, based on that. So yes, they act as they're the sovereignty, we are the subjects. It is a modern palace rebellion. It's been this inversion for a very long time. They haven't been able to take this country on head to head, militarily. So it's been subversion, treason, the sedition, the constant little injection of, your Jeffrey Epstein, manipulated individuals, your blackmailed individuals, your whoever, all the influencers. I'm not going to point any fingers, too hard here. I just saw one just today, where they actually came out and said, that it's the pressure about the Epstein files is coming from Israel, because Epstein was a Mossad agent. Now, I mean, I met a lot of really nice Israeli people in my life, just like this country. I don't agree with what, Dick Cheney and, and Obama, whoever have done in the past. Doesn't mean I don't like people, the people of this country, but that's one of the things going on there. It's just a fact, but the Epstein client list, and of course, who's Epstein connected with? The pervert formerly known as the Prince of Perverts, Andrew, who is, immediate descendant of Queen Lizard Breath, So, it doesn't take a whole lot of, rocket science to put together who's behind the infiltration and subversion, of the country. But anyway, so just keep in mind, if you want to take on this type of battle, you're going to be fighting a constant uphill battle. Most people you talk to are not going to believe this. Going to have a hard time wrapping their heads around it. We do when we first learn about these things. Okay, and I've seen little bits and pieces my whole life about the straw man, about how the people are sovereign, how the government is acting constantly unconstitutionally, etc., etc. But the knowledge I've been able to come across in the last, I found it about 10 years ago, but in the last couple of years, I've really, really, really lived, eat, breathe, and and pooped it. So yeah, it's people are going to think you're whack, you're crazy. Any attorney you talk to, damn near, probably 99.9% of all attorneys you talk to are going to laugh at you, because they know, they know that they're part of the club, as George Carlin would say. So this is a really important one right here. Very popular, well-known case. I want to say they've actually, I think it might have been Chisholm versus Georgia actually, where there was a state that made it a crime to base a case on this citation. That was actually Chisholm versus Georgia, which is very similar. But the people of this state, as the successors of its former sovereign, are entitled to all the rights which formerly belonged to the king by his prerogative. Okay. Once again, is there anything about that that's not clear? Okay, so to have your own court was one of the rights of the king. Okay, so people looking at you like you're crazy, they don't know, they've been miseducated for too long. They spend too much time, watching football and drinking beer or looking at TikTok, whatever. It's all good. I do things for fun sometimes too, but the point is the distractions and the miseducation, the infiltration of our universities. Come on now, China and whoever dumping, billions of dollars into the universities. People like that. This Pritzker, this governor. I just saw one a couple of days ago where he is refusing to produce the injury, the autism data to RFK, so they can determine what's causing the autism. Is it related to the vaccines? Oh no, I don't mean to go on a tirade here, but oh no, you're crazy. There's no connection there, right? While Pritzker tries to block the production of the evidence, so they can't find out how the connections actually work there. Okay, so his sister, or whatever, it's transgender, Pritzker's ex-brother, or brother now, parading as a woman, had dumped like the largest donation in history, I want to say, and I forget which university it was now, to transform their entire, I forget what department it was, but into a whole transgender mill. So the universities, have been very much compromised. The schools have been controlled by government to teach us what they want us to know. Everything that they teach us practically that has some deeper meaning is a lie. It's misleading. The history, you name it. Okay, the Tesla technology has been suppressed. The free energy technology, the idea of being a good citizen versus one of the people. Anyway, there's a whole lot, to cover there. But I'm going to pull up this Magna Carta site again. You already saw it, but there it is. So, if no free man shall be deprived of his court, in so many words. Okay? And the people of the republic are the sovereignty and can exercise their powers either directly or through representatives. Okay? And a court is the person and suit of the sovereign. That sounds like you can have a court. And this has been done. I'm not the first one to take this information and put it to use. There have been, many before me. I'm not that young, but I'm kind of the young blood, or at least one of the ones in the game here, promoting this. And I began studying this stuff years ago, for things like driver's license crap, and in the last couple of years, I've had some real personal issues with my ex-wife and my kids, trying to just use the full force of the system, which seems to just love to jump in and and do what they do. When someone tries to sick them on a man, especially in Wisconsin. I guess Wisconsin is the second largest incarceration rate, second only to California. Okay, there's like 36 prisons in Wisconsin, and I'm from Oregon most of my life. But anyway, so it's got to the point where they're trying to give me like a very short amount of time with my kids, without meeting the statutory requirements even. So that's part of it. And also defending against, false allegations from my ex and whatnot. This my personal stuff, but the point is, the motivation, the lighting of the blowtorch, underneath of me to really excel in this area, which is something I've always wanted to do anyway. And reading comprehension was my best subject in school and whatnot. So the English, it comes together pretty easily. So yes, and it's been done. I have done this in several different corporations, more commonly referred to as counties, and they are corporations. Look it up on Dun and Bradstreet. They're listed right there. For example, most of them are judiciary courts of the state of Wisconsin doing business as, XYZ County Circuit Court. Okay, yeah, all have key principles. It's a business, and most people know that. But I mean, there's no denying it, no debating it. They're listed on the corporation list websites. Zoom Info, Dun and Bradstreet, they're all listed up there. Matter of fact, state of Wisconsin is a corporation, and take a wild guess who the key principal is. His Excellency Tony Evers, who I think looks like John Podesta myself. That's exactly the vibe he gives me completely, and I'm pretty sure there's a good reason for it. But I have no facts on that. That's just what he looks like to me. Maybe the facts will come out sooner than later. I've had His Excellency's little servant there, Mr. Josh Call, defend at least 2 DAs against me in court in the last few years. And of course, whenever you try to sue any government official, they're going to sing the same song. Okay. The plaintiff failed to state, my brain is having a glitch here. Failed to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. Okay, and we're sovereign. We have sovereign immunity. Now, if you've ever observed Josh Call, okay, just go look at him sometime online. Watch him speak. And tell me if you get kind of a similar vibe to Pritzker. You know what I mean? I'm just saying. So, and he's an attorney. And he recently was part of some legal action where they were trying to sue to keep open the unmonitored, ballot drop boxes, where there was, of course, no fraud whatsoever. Don't look at the Nestor Souza's documentary, 2,000 Mules, whatever it was, where they tracked the cell phone data and the local surveillance videos from the little convenience stores and all that, where people were going to the drop boxes, holding their cameras up, holding up their, the 18 ballots and taking selfies so they can get paid for their work and going back to the little warehouses and making more and more trips to the drop box. Okay, so Call was part of a legal action to keep those things open, to prevent them from being closed. He also is helping to try to prevent Tesla from having dealerships in Wisconsin, because they don't want Tesla to have dealerships in here where they are direct to consumer, direct to people. They're going to force you, and companies like Bergstrom, this is the main big auto company out here. I just talked to someone today who was, mentioned them, something to do with, he's a mechanic, but regardless, these companies, they have like a group, like an HOA or type of group, not an HOA, but some type of little consortium of all these car dealerships, and they are like, no, we're going to be the middleman. We're going to be the one who produces nothing, and we're going to stand in between you and Tesla. You're not going to buy a car from Tesla. You have to go through us, okay? and call is right there. Put it as the council to help prevent Tesla. I started a petition about it actually, but I've been doing so many things I didn't really get a chance. I actually tried to advertise it on X and they blocked me for some reason. X like wouldn't. It's been like 3 or 4 weeks, and the X ad support won't message me back. So I don't know what's up with that. That's a really interesting one there. I think that some of the higher up people in the company might like to know about that. People in there blocking me from just paying to advertise a petition to help Tesla sell cars in Wisconsin. Um, anyway, that petition was not going to anyone, any of the members of the would-be nobility, though. That petition was just going to be a backing for a case I was going to file myself. This petition as showing the people are in agreement with me. Anyway, so yeah, it's an interesting point when you look at these attorneys and whatnot. So I have taken action against several counties, several corporations, the state of Wisconsin, in all caps, which is a corporation, state of Wisconsin Inc., which makes like $40 billion a year. Okay, you look it up again on Zoom Info. It's right there. It's all you have to do is look. The Oneida, Jefferson, vilest county, I was calling it because of how egregious that things were up there in some regards, in northern Wisconsin. And I've held 2 different magistrates, which is what a judge is. Many will argue that point with you, but look it up in NOLO's simple, plain English law dictionary. A magistrate is a generic term for a judge in the U.S. Okay, and that's the definition in Black's Law Dictionary. I'm sorry I didn't have that pulled up and prepared here, but I'll talk while I find it. That is the definition. That is what's referenced, rather, in the definition of a court of record. And yes, this handwritten one, I wrote that by hand when I was in a county jail recently here. They don't like it when you keep your own kids beyond when the sovereign Lord Chancellor, when your master tells you that you can and can't have your kids. I have a 3 and a 5-year-old, and I've done nothing to hurt them. The GAL was my ex's attorney's partner for 15 years. Okay, it is the most insidious. They look at it like this. Like I said, they think that they're going to purport that the people have, in their sovereign capacity, decreed that they are now the servants of, the servants, the subjects of their masters, and if they feel like it, they're going to just appoint some insidious guardian de sun tort like this entity, Jennifer Stuber. Yeah, I'll say her name, but I believe I will. Right here in Wisconsin, who, let's look her up on lawyers.com. Did the same exact thing to me. She ignored 80 pages of evidence. It means nothing. The statutes mean nothing to them because they are basically operating at a sovereign capacity. They decree the law. Okay, that's what the judges do. If you allow them to get you into their court, they are decreeing the law. They're acting as a chancellor, which is someone who was like the king's right-hand man, who can just do whatever they want. They can make up law on the spot. They don't have to obey the statutes or anything else. I'm trying to find something recent here. I apologize. Let's see here. Just want to find one where it has the Black's Law. Let me just pull it up out of a different one I can get to quickly. My folders are so full of stuff, it's ridiculous. Let's see. At 1215 is the year the Magna Carta was written, and there's also quite a bit there that I have learned from their website. I'm just going to go ahead and draw from this right here because it's just quicker to find than one of mine. Many of the same sites, just customized with more things I've found, and also with more Wisconsin stuff. So this is the law of the case, and when you file one of your cases, you add a section called law of the case, and it decrees the law. And that is the word, decrees, like as I showed you the site. Okay, the very definition of sovereignty is that the sovereign decrees the law, which is the people in this country. So there's the Chisholm versus Georgia. At the Revolution, the sovereignty devolved on the people, and they are truly the sovereigns of the country, but they are sovereigns without subjects, with none to govern but themselves. So that's the thing. You can't impinge on anyone else's sovereignty. But apart from that, all this driver's license nonsense, insurance, forcing you to have a commercial contract with some little, BlackRock, Vanguard, Jeffrey Epstein's client, insurance company, and another bankster. I mean, that's it's as absurd as you could possibly imagine. However, they do have, they have agreed to allow them to regulate commerce, but nonetheless, traveling is a right. The idea is so absurd. You said that someone who works for you can tell you, you can't, you can't travel. You have to pay me. I mean, that's not gangster, mafia, extortion, man. Then nothing is. Anyway, I'm not going to go into all these sites right now. I just want to get to the court of record, so you can see it yourself. Let's see here. Okay, here you go. Here you go. Court of record. And a judicial tribunal having attributes and exercising functions independently of the person of the magistrate designated generally to hold it. So, okay, the tribunal is the one who makes decisions. Okay, the magistrate is what they now all the time call the judge, but they're not a real judge. So, if the magistrate, the one sitting up on the bench in the black robe, doesn't make the decisions, then who does? Well, it can only be the sovereign, and only when you're the plaintiff, by the way. Like I said, there's a procedure here. Do not take what I'm teaching and walk into court and just start talking about I'm sovereign, because you have to follow a certain procedure here. The whole system is against you, kind of like Trump, like people say a lot about Trump. I know Trump's not perfect, but when all the corrupt establishment filth hate someone that much, they're probably doing something right. And I think that's showing more and more now with this this tax bill and this the pharmaceutical mafia, product prices being forced down, etc. I think Trump has done some good things. Let's leave it at that. Okay, and number 2, proceeding according to the course of common law. That's another thing. That's a night and day. Okay, not statutes, not ordinances, not penal codes. Okay, not codes, common law. And that's a whole deep subject. What is common law? The common law is whatever the people decide it is. That's why a real jury, a real trial by jury, which again is another point we'll get to it at a future time, is not reversible, even by the Supreme Court. And the other 3 aspects of a court of record are really not that important. It's basic stuff. It's keeps a memory of the proceedings, has the power to fine or imprison for contempt, and generally possesses a seal. So, and you can seal your papers too. Get yourself a little seal. Or you can just write seal on there if you want to. That's good enough. It just has to say seal. So, there's also one that talks about the. It's like reinforcing the Magna Carta. Our justices, sheriffs, mayors, and other ministers, which under us have the laws of our land to guide, shall allow said charters pleaded before them in judgment in all their points. That is, to wit, the Great Charter as the common law. Great Charter being the Magna Carta. And that's Sources of Our Liberties from an American Bar Foundation book of all places. Okay. And again, here's Magna Carta repeated, that no free man shall lose his court. So, as I said, I've held several, 2 actually. I've held 2 magistrates in contempt so far, twice each. Okay. Now it didn't cause them to, to roll over and and acquiesce to whatever I was up to, but it definitely got their attention. And ultimately, if they don't acquiesce, the ultimate step is to issue a bench warrant for them. And I know of one other time this has been tried, and they didn't arrest the judge based on one of these court procedures I'm telling you about. Okay, but they released the woman who they were holding and dropped the 4 felonies to 1 misdemeanor, gave her time served, and let her go after they issued a bench warrant for the judge. Okay. Now, they're never going to tell you, never going to admit this is why they did these things, but it's solid. The concepts here are solid, and I'm going to put more examples on the website to study, and I'm balancing this with everything else I have going on. in life right now, fighting these fights and trying to get more attention on this. I'm working on a petition to remove Boasberg, and yeah, it's real. It's the real deal. You know, the hour is not as late as we may think. You know, this still is a republic, even though the power is being abused. The corruption is rampant. You know, it seems like a high time right now with the political climate, with everything going on. You know, that we may have more backing, because I guess the way this works is somewhere in government, you know, there are honest people. Some of them are honest. I shouldn't say somewhere. I mean, there are honest people in government. And when we file these type of papers, someone who you'll never know about behind the scenes, you know, sees this, you know, and realizes that this is real, and it can cause these people to be reeled in. When I filed my case in Jefferson Corporation in Wisconsin, they transferred it over to a guy named Maxwell in Waukesha, Wisconsin, who is the professor of law at the university. So I'll just say this: when you file your case, they don't realize what you're doing. Okay, they don't understand that when you say, "I'm one of the people, and in this court of record, complain of the following," they don't get it. You know, again, you got to keep it. There's a procedure to follow, and you know, you don't go in there saying you're sovereign. I mean, you say you're one of the people, and then elsewhere in your paper you indicate, you know, the people are sovereign. So you file your paperwork, you make it look, you try to follow all the statutory procedures of making your paperwork, you know, fit the narrative, you know, fit the regulations, you know, the fonts. You don't make big letters, you know, make it, you know, just say, you know, God is on my side. You just make it like a regular law paper, like an attorney would. Matter of fact, when I first got into this, I was told, if you're not already an attorney, take this other case first. So I'm going to drop a link to that in here, and that is an affiliate link, by the way. And, you know, but I mean, again, this is, it's, you know, it's whether you use my affiliate link or not. If you're not an attorney, there's a website. It was Jurisdictionary. I think he dropped that name and just has how to win in court now. But now that guy has nothing to do with any of this of the sovereignty of the people stuff. He just teaches basic legal stuff, you know, just basic stuff that attorneys know. So don't ask him for any advice on this, because he's gonna look at you like you're nuts, like most attorneys do. But yeah, so you file your paperwork, you make it look like an attorney filed it as much as possible, and you follow the statutory procedures of filing your paperwork and drafting your paperwork. But as long as it doesn't, you know, mess with your rights. And I'll tell you one thing, another thing too, in modern times, as far as just finding good sites and whatnot, and just drafting briefs, you know, because sometimes, you know, we file stuff in their court. Just, you know, I feel like the strategy is just to give them an excuse, you know, to acquiesce. You know, if you hold them in contempt a couple times, and then you file a motion, you know, just asking them to do something, you know, to give them an easy out. They don't have to admit that they, you know, that this had power over them. They can just, you know, quietly dispose of the matter, you know, based on your motion. But regardless, what I'm saying is, when it comes to finding sites and drafting briefs, you know, don't rely on this completely, obviously, but the AI. Like the AI now can, I mean, go look up how many services there are now. They're charging big bucks for attorneys. And I've been hearing from high-level attorneys that that's what most attorneys are doing now, using just the AI to draft their briefs for them. It's very good at researching and citing, you know, coming up with things. But anyway, you draft your paperwork in the regular manner as if you were doing a legal procedure. But the key phrase is there. You know, I'm one of the people, and in this court of record, complain of the following. Okay, and you can do a claim, you can do a counterclaim. Most often it's a counterclaim when they come at you with some type of unconstitutional nonsense, trying to put you in their for-profit prison system, get you into their you know, their preschool to prison pipeline system, and you counterclaim against them. And you do it immediately, as soon as you possibly can. You want to have your counterclaim filed before you even get to any arraignment. Because as soon as you, now here's another thing, as soon as you admit to, as soon as you enter a plea, okay, guilty, not guilty, nolo contendere, no contest, as soon as you say any of those things, you are acknowledging, you are accepting their jurisdiction over you, their sovereignty over you. But what you're really saying is, I accept the statute. I stand under and I accept the jurisdiction and the statute, and I plead X, Y, Z. So don't do that. You don't put in a plea. And like I said, you want to have your counterclaim in that situation before you even get to the arraignment. And in Wisconsin, it's like 45 days that they have to respond. So if you can, delay it all till you've already had your paperwork in, and the time has already elapsed for them to respond. By the time that it happens, by the time before your arraignment, that's great. Anyway, so they don't realize what it means. Most of them don't. Probably, I don't know if any of them do, but most of them will not understand what that means when you say these things. So what happens is a hearing is held, and most often, somebody like Call will represent the entity, against you, and no matter what you say, they could have shot somebody in the face. Oh, they failed to state a claim upon which relief can be granted, and we're sovereign. What is this guy? Who's I think he is, So, and the magistrate will almost certainly acquiesce to the, on the side of their buddy, and then they will file a minute order. Get into that. A minute order is not a constitutional order because it's a court of record, and they can't file an order. They don't have authority to do that because they're a magistrate in a court of record. They'll file an order, and when you go to that hearing, okay, don't argue with the judge. Don't scowl at the at the bailiff. Just go in there, and act like you have to be able to put all the emotion aside. And then when you get home, you file a writ of error, vacating and rescinding that magistrate's decision, and you always explain the basis upon which you're acting here. And that's that document I started reading before, my handwritten one that I wrote in partly in New Mexico and partly in Vilest County Jail, where you explain the jurisdiction and you cite it and you explain it. You don't just file an order; you explain it. Whether it's a contempt ruling, whether it's a writ of error, whether it's an order, whatever it is, you always explain it. And you'll find examples upon which to do that. I've already shown you the main principles, right there. And there's many other cases that talk about, an unconstitutional act is not a law. How the agents, cannot act unlawfully in the name of the state. The state is the people, by the way, not the government. There's a difference, big difference there. But because no sovereign can authorize their agent to act unlawfully. So when they act in that manner, their words or deeds are not the word or deed of the state, but merely, I'm going from Poindexter versus Greenhow now. They're merely the wrongs and trespasses of those individual persons who falsely speak and act in its name, or in the name of the people, basically. And there's all kinds of sites like that you can use, but basically, you want to put all the foundational principles of what a court of record is, and all courts in the country are supposed to be courts of record, but they're not. And if you let them dupe you into acquiescing, into accepting the jurisdiction through failure to object, through tacit implication, through implied consent, then you accept, contracting into an alternative legal system outside of a court of record, outside of the common law, into their special interest, the paradise of the world of statutes, which, by the way, is based on Roman civil law, and the common law is based on the English common law. Anyway, I'll read through this. Some have argued that the people have relinquished sovereignty through various contractual devices in which rights were not expressly reserved. However, that does not hold. The people will retain all rights of sovereignty at all times. And there is a case, it's everything, in this paper I drew up here, I was writing in pencil or pen, and I was having copies made. And so I made one set of papers that would be the bulk of it, and then I can make various orders and writs based around that. It's interesting what you'll do when you have to figure out a way. So the site there is, I could look it up, if nothing else. It is, I think it's on the site page, so I'm pretty sure it is. Let's see, where are we at? Where are we at? Sorry about that. Okay, here we go. Let me just look for it here. I'm not seeing it on there. Okay, well, it's Marion et al. Versus Jicarilla Apache Tribe, and it talks about a case where some natives, interesting, a little case summary. It talks about a case where some natives and their tribe entered into a contract with a corporation, and Well, here we go right here. To presume that a sovereign forever waives the right to exercise one of its powers unless it expressly reserves the right to exercise that power in a commercial agreement, turns the concept of sovereignty on its head. Okay? So, anyone who's told you if you signed your driver's license, you signed your rights away. No. No. So that's where we have this here. The people retain all rights of sovereignty at all times. The exercise of sovereignty by the people is further clarified when we consider the Constitution government agencies, so that the constitutional government agencies have no genuine sovereign power of their own, but must rely upon such authority as is granted by the people. And I have a really good case site for that too. I'm not going to look that up right now, but where it says, the three branches must look to the Constitution for all power, not so with the sovereign people. And I found a case site that said that. Like the one I was actually in jail looking on the kiosk. But it's a great site. Great site. This then is the sovereign power by which this court is created. The Constitution for the United States of America mandates that the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity arising under this Constitution, the law of the United States, and treaties made or which shall be made under their authority. And what it's saying is the judicial power extends to this court, in this case, your court, and the case you're working with here. And, in this case, I wasn't writing the footnotes in. I was referencing another page because I was writing by hand. This is a case at law, i.e. proceeding according to the common law in a court of record. This case arises under the Constitution and the laws of the United States. It follows that the judicial power of the people of the United States shall extend to this case. The petitioner, this was a habeas corpus I filed regarding my kids, has the status of one of the people of Wisconsin, or you could say whatever state you're in, or the U.S. if it's a federal case, nunc pro tunc, which means from the beginning. The people of Wisconsin have the prerogative of claiming sovereign immunity in cases such as this one. Say if you murder someone, then it changes things. So that's why I say in this case, and you don't tell them that. Again, you don't act as their attorney. You don't go tell them, oh, well, there's no injured party here. Let them figure that out. If they fail to address that issue, and they don't do it timely, they lost the opportunity to address it. This extraordinary attack by state of Wisconsin, which is a corporation, I put it in all caps like that, against one of the people of Wisconsin, Ivan H. Scarborough. You don't have to write your name like that. That's something else I learned from another class, but it's not necessary. Requires this atypical method in dealing with this matter. The petitioner is sui juris and not represented by an attorney, and this is so. Pro se is something that means something different too. I don't remember the definition. I don't have that one memorized, but pro se is not what you want to be. Sui juris is more accurate, and in propria persona is the other one. You're not representing yourself. You are yourself. Okay. Representing is another term that means basically trying to split you. They're saying representing your all caps name, the artificial person. Which is different than the citizen idea, but nonetheless they intertwine. But you don't need to raise the issue of the all caps name. Just a matter of citizen or people is enough. You can raise that issue if you choose to. The status of the people of Wisconsin as the sovereigns of the state of Wisconsin is a non-justiciable political question upon which the Wisconsin courts and the district attorneys cannot trespass. And I say, no disrespect is intended, and I'm kind of quoting here, no disrespect is intended to the magistrates of Wisconsin, for they are the mirror of the sovereign people, the people's agents. As long as they are on the bench, the people of Wisconsin shall never be non-suited or fail to appear in court. In the past, the petitioner has successfully asserted his status as one of the people of Wisconsin and expects that his wish and will as one of the people of Wisconsin be respected and acknowledged. This is our system of justice. It must be respected, though you may not personally agree. Some of this wording I've taken from other papers, other folks I've learned from. But regardless, I have the concept is solid. It's solid in my mind. It's solid, and I completely have a grasp on it. In the petition, the petitioner Ivan identifies as one of the people of Wisconsin. As such, he decrees the law for this court, and ultimately for this court as a court of record. Further, the subsequent courts involved were shown to lack jurisdiction, thus they were courts of inferior jurisdiction, even though otherwise courts of general jurisdiction. So, a common law court is a superior court of general jurisdiction. An inferior court of special or limited jurisdiction. And I'm using specific wording here that you can look up in any case, and in any case law and references. This is not, this is something that they're familiar with. So when they're proceeding according to statutes, they are proceeding as a special or an inferior court of special or limited jurisdiction. And Now, the county courts are supposed to be courts of record and supposed to be superior courts of general jurisdiction. That's why it says when they proceed under statutes, they're not. The court of record cannot be in name only. When they're not proceeding according to the common law, they become inferior courts of special or limited jurisdiction, even though otherwise courts of general jurisdiction. Further, when jurisdiction was challenged by my habeas corpus in this case, or by a counterclaim, which is more common, honestly. The counterclaim, has teeth, as they call it. It's asking for damages. The habeas corpus does not ask for damages. It's a challenge to jurisdiction. It's an ancient thing. Habeas corpus ad subjudiendum has been called the second Magna Carta. It was called the Great Writ, and it used to be used by government agencies or royal agencies to challenge the jurisdiction of another court. Because the king had the Star Chamber Court, the Court of the Exchequer, the King's Bench, the Admiralty, etc. So courts would challenge each other. So that's why habeas corpus was so powerful, because it wasn't about the rights of the people, it was about government challenging other agencies for jurisdiction. Anyway, this is based on the habeas corpus. That's why it says respondents, by the way, and not defendants or counter-defendants. So, further, when jurisdiction was challenged, all of the respondents ignored the challenge and assumed the jurisdiction without proof. And now I say, okay, sorry, I made a typo here. Counter-defendants were given full opportunity to prove. It should have said respondents, or it should have been consistent there. Regardless, you try to keep consistency, but as a typo there, I apologize for that. Counter-defendants were given full opportunity to prove jurisdiction and failed to do so or make any attempt at proving jurisdiction. And once again, you can look up sites yourself. When jurisdiction is challenged, it must be proven. They can't just assume it. The magistrates, various attorneys, and officers of the court involved do not have the same status as enjoyed by the people of Wisconsin. They are persons as defined in the Penal Code and subject to said Penal Code. They all owe allegiance to the state, the people of Wisconsin. There is no qualified immunity for those persons who misbehave in this case. Everyone is aware of the status of Ivan as one of the people of Wisconsin. The people of Wisconsin are the state, and that's the truth. You look it up. The state is the assemblage of the people. I asked this DA the other day when I was in a hearing, you represent the state of Wisconsin, the corporation, or state of Wisconsin, or the assemblage of the people? And he answered. He said assemblage of the people. Of course, he's lying. And look at his paycheck. I bet we know who signs it. His Excellency and his corporation. And what was I going to say there? They're acting ultra-virus, VIRES. That's the term, when they're acting outside of the spheres of their of their constitutionally defined spheres of influence. And once they do that, they have no judicial immunity, no derivative immunity, no sovereign immunity. Because government does have some sovereignty, that it derives from the people. But once they step out of line, they lose that completely. I mean, don't get me wrong. Their armed guards around them are still going to defend them because that's what they think is supposed to do. If a person, not one of the people, as defined in the Penal Code, comes before an inferior court, which is neither acting as a court of record nor proceeding according to the course of the common law, the judge has two primary functions, magistrate and tribunal. When a sovereign people of Wisconsin is in his court of record, he assumes the mantle of the tribunal, independent of the magistrate. The judge's role, the magistrate's role, in the proceedings is limited to that of a magistrate, authorized only to dismiss the case with prejudice. That's why he's even ordered to do so. Only because he's been ordered to do so, does he even have that power. The people of Wisconsin expect judicial integrity from those who sit on the bench as their mirror image. It is the judge's duty, obligation, and responsibility to do the wish and will of the people of Wisconsin. Now, if you look at all the states, all the acts, all the bills that start with an act, what's the word? It's the enabling act or the enacting clause behind any bill. At least in Wisconsin and in California, I can't say for every state, but I'm pretty sure they all start with the people of the state hereby enact said. It doesn't say the citizens. The people enact all the through the legislature. So I mean, it all comes from the people. It's all the wish of the people, but it's all just twisted. It's all it's been so manipulated. The petitioner Ivan's authority is rooted in the history and philosophy of our system of constitutional law and justice in Wisconsin. All courts in Wisconsin are courts of record, and if you look up the statutes, that's exactly what it says. The whole section about courts is called courts of record, okay? But they don't act as a court of record. They act as an admiralty court, an equity court, a chancery court, a corporation court, all that garbage, anything but what it's supposed to be, so they can take the power and pretend that they are our masters. So it's getting dark. All courts of record proceed according to the common law. Without sovereign decree, statutes and codes have no standing in a court of record. If a superior court, proceeding outside the constitutional requirements to be a court of record, if a superior court proceeds outside the constitutional requirements to be a court of record, then the superior court becomes a superior court in name only, and is in fact an inferior court of special or limited jurisdiction, as I said before, that is inherently inferior to any court of record and is open to collateral inquiry. A collateral inquiry is like a collateral attack. Look that term up. That's a technical term in law, and it means it can be attacked by another court, a superior court, either a higher chancery court, a higher statutory court, or a court of record, a real court. Wisconsin has two distinct. I already touched on this. Roman law and civil law, yes. The common law, yes. Touched this already. Yes. Because the United States Constitution guarantees to each state a republican form of government. Article 4, Section 4 of the United States Constitution, the law of the people outranks the law of the government. Yeah. This is exemplified in the U.S. Constitution Amendment 7, which prohibits any court to review of a determination of facts by a jury in law, and I mentioned that earlier too. And I also wanted to, when I said that there's a case, I don't have to even look it up. It's a Schneckloth versus Bustamante, and I actually found other cases have the same quote recently. And it says basically that a court of record whose jurisdiction is final, a decision from a court of record whose jurisdiction is final is as binding on all courts as a decision from this court would be. It is as binding on this court as on all other courts. This is Supreme Court talking. It puts an end to inquiry by deciding it. So, what does that tell you? Okay, the Supreme Court are our agents, and our court is superior to the Supreme Court, and that's what that case says. Okay, let's see here. Search for this real quick. Right there. The judgment of a court of record whose jurisdiction is final is as conclusive on all the world as the judgment of this court would be, the Supreme Court. It is as conclusive on this court, the Supreme Court, as it is on other courts. Okay? Puts an end to inquiry concerning the fact by deciding it. Schneckloth versus Bustamante, U.S. Supreme Court. Once again, what's the court of record? It's your court. Okay? Access to the common law is guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution. However, for lack of knowledge, most never have their day in common law court despite the constitutional guarantees due to lack of education. The Wisconsin Constitution states, "We the people of Wisconsin, passed by the people, for their republican form of government, the republic." This 1848 Constitution was submitted to the Congress of the United States of America, and Wisconsin was found to be republican in its form of government. Right? Comprende? In other words, it is a republic, one where the powers of the sovereignty are in the people, and they may exercise their powers directly if they so choose, or through legislature. Okay? References to "we the people of the state of Wisconsin" are of a different meaning. The state is a person, possesses all its property in one territory, as its property in one territory. As this one civil person consists of all the citizens, so its property consists of all the individual property of the citizens. It is una persona unicum patrimonium. There is no cause to usurp jurisdiction under color of law. Anyone who has studied this stuff a little bit knows what the under color of law is. That's a very famous one. It's like a 1984, 1983 Title 42, I believe it is, of the U.S. Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. Which is what all this crap is. All what they do, as I said. If it's not lawful, it's not the will of the people, and it can't be. It can't be lawful if it's not. It can't be. They can't be acting in the name of the state if it's not lawful. Period. This court of record of counter plaintiff Ivan takes judicial notice of the enabling act of Article 4 of the Wisconsin Constitution section, which I already touched on this. The style of all laws of the state shall be: the people of the state of Wisconsin represented in Senate and Assembly do enact as follows. So every law has to be written as the people enact it. The power of the people do it. Okay, but again, the judiciary and the legislature, they want to act like they are the only ones who can wield the power of the people. But no. Sovereignty is individual, not collective. Those who wish to exercise their plenary power for their own defense do so individually, not in relationship to other people with the same status. The concept of sovereignty stands on its own. Again, some of this wording I've taken from previous people, from previous, people I've learned from. But regardless, this is it. The sources cited herein and in the law of the case will show that sovereignty is a respected and valid concept that may be used when needed by the people of Wisconsin, or whatever state you're in. I'm messing up here, man, with the petitioner versus counterplaintiff. I apologize. It was a little stressful writing this in pencil, and you can't go back and edit it. Petitioner, or counterplaintiff, whichever it is, has chosen an action at law in a court of record. Okay? The Constitution for the United States of America acknowledges the people's rights to the common law of England as it was in 1789. What is the common law? It does not consist of fixed, absolute, and inflexible rules, but broad, comprehensive principles based on justice, reason, and common sense. There is a document up on Scribd where it has all this, and it also has the judicial cognizance section where you can see each footnote, what it links to. It's like 25, 30 pages of just case sites. Magna Carta says, we know this, no free man will lose his court. In this case, the free man's court is the court of record of counterplaintiff, as above entitled. The Constitution for the United States of America, Article 3, Section 2-1 says, the judicial power shall extend to all cases in law and equity under this Constitution, the laws of the United States. The judicial power is therefore extended to this case at law in the above entitled court of record. An exercise of jurisdiction is an exercise of sovereignty, as explained by Chief Justice Marshall, and I linked that, that footnote there. It's a good one. It's very interesting as it applies to all this. The people are truly the sovereigns of the United States and of each state, and are not required to look to the Constitution as are the three branches of government, which I mentioned earlier too. Sorry, that site I don't have memorized yet. The People's Court possesses the highest authority, sovereignty, equaling the highest supreme and original will, the highest jurisdiction, a true, preeminent, superior court of general and unlimited jurisdiction. The government of the United States is a government ordained by the Constitution and possesses power conferred by the Constitution. The original and supreme will organizes the government and assigns to different departments their respective powers. That's actually a site right there, U.S. Supreme Court, as you can see. Further, government actors engaged in unlawful acts which violate the supreme law of the land do not act in the name of the state, i.e. the people, for a sovereign cannot authorize its agent to act unlawfully. The power which is derived cannot be greater than that from which it is derived. And those are both cited too, with footnotes. Governments, the Declaration of Independence states, derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. The Constitution begins, we the people of the United States. The Gettysburg Address almost ends, governments of the people, by the people, for the people, and of the people. Governments of the people, by the people, for the people. If there is a simple idea that made our nation, and that our nation commended to the world, it is this one: the people are sovereign. The power, James Madison wrote, is in the people over government, and not in the government over the people. 4 Annals of Congress, 1794, Rucho versus Common Cause is Connecticut. No, I'm sorry, that's U.S. Supreme Court, SC, U.S. Supreme Court, 2019. Okay? We may define a republic to be a government which derives all its powers directly or indirectly from the great body of the people. The general understanding of republicanism across America at the founding embraced a concept of government in which the people are sovereign, in which the people are consequently the foundation of all power, in which all authority should flow from the people. And there are many more sites. Just type in sovereignty sometime on a case website. Okay, so that's the end of this analysis and jurisdiction of the court. So, yeah. Let's see here. I know I do have an X page, and I've been posting. I have some live videos on there, and up there is a link I want to say to the example that's on the Scribd page. but I'll get some more examples posted so you can start to get some hands-on, some eyes on some of the material. Yeah, so I don't want to clickbait this out too much, but basically I need to put in so many words, learn to hold a judge in contempt. Okay, and I'll tell you something else. When I filed my habeas corpus in regard to my family case, and I have a stack of cases that say yes, habeas corpus is applicable to family cases, and whether I do or not, it's a jurisdictional challenge, so it is. It's a common law writ too, by the way. Habeas corpus ad sub judiendum is a common law writ. So I had a gut feeling to file it in the appeals court, and that was not necessary, but I did so. And so I filed this habeas corpus, the petition, and the writ. Understand? When you ask a court for a writ, you don't file the writ. You file the petition for the writ, and then the court files the writ. So I petitioned my own court for the writ and filed them both the same day with the appeals court. It's also a corporation, by the way. Same name, Judiciary Courts of the State of Wisconsin, DBA Court of Appeals. Look it up. And of course, it took them a couple of days to get back, and of course, they issued an order saying, these people, I gave them like 100-page, and it wasn't for them anyway. I was never relying on them in the first place, but they're so despicable. They're so repugnant, like that old Pinky in the Brain. You're repugnant. You're all repugnant. It's like I gave them like 100 pages of case cites, and the habeas corpus petition itself, which was thick. And of course, they complained about that. They wrote back with like one case cite, something about some circus wagon wheel company versus some other nonsense, and of course, rubber stamp denied it. Regardless, it didn't matter because they're not in charge in a court of record. It was a three magistrate panel, and so I issued a writ of error, vacating their order. Okay, and they just kept coming back and saying, oh well, Mr. Scarborough has filed another paper, and we're going to go ahead and construe it as being a motion, even though it says right in there, this is an order. This is not a motion or moving paper. So I filed multiple writs, which are orders, multiple summary contempt rulings against one of the lower magistrates of the county corporation. And, they didn't acquiesce, but the thing is, I'm filing these orders, contempt rulings, orders, writs, with the same clerk who is the clerk of the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Okay? And they never charged me with simulation of legal process. Okay? Now, this is really a revelation right here too. In Oneida Corporation, which is up near like Rhinelander, it's actually right in Rhinelander is the seat of Oneida Corporation. I filed one with them, and it had the heading of the county with the case number of the appeals court, and they hit me with a charge for simulation of court process, which is a felony in Wisconsin too, by the way, which is it's such a joke. And I asked him, like, I'm sorry, if you're, because it basically was a typo. It had the heading of the appeals court, sorry, the heading of the county corporation with the case number from the appeals, and they pretended they didn't know what it was. We don't know what case that is. I mean, it was a habeas corpus, had to do with a bunch of their magistrates and their attorneys and whatnot. So the fact that they didn't charge me with that for all the writs and rulings and orders that I filed in the appeals court and with Oneida Corporation, but then try to charge me with that for one that had a typo on it, is very, very revealing. Okay, to my mind, that is nothing but a clear demonstration that this is completely legitimate. A lot of people are going to question what we're up to here. But like I said, when you see how slow the wheels of justice with their statutory system turn, the bribery, the corruption, just the whole trip, they can just delay tactic things for forever and ever. And even if you change something, guess what? The magistrates acting as chancellors won't even obey it if you do get it changed. So you know, this really is an answer um, to what's going on with them trying to steal people's children and whatnot, and it needs to be promoted. It needs to be learned. People need to, come back to this civics. Something I was going to say before. I heard Trump back in 2016, and he claimed, that when he took office in 2016, he said this is not another exchange of power from one special interest group to another. This is returning the power to the people. And that's not a word for word quote. It's been 10 years since he said that, which gone by so fast. But anyway, if we know what the knowledge that I'm talking about here, if he meant what he said at all, it has to do with this. And I'm not saying it just has to do with this, but this is exactly what we're talking about. The people, the power to the people. And please don't avoid chanting, for democracy, because in a democracy you are mandated by the will of the majority. As my guy says, 49% of the people have no rights in a democracy. In a republic, the statutes and ordinances are advisory, because the people are the sovereignty. So a constitutional republic is what we have here, and with democratic elements, But anyway, I actually put that in my papers. I said, let's find out together, how much Trump meant what he said about restoring the power to the people. And in the past, like I said, people have found success here in hidden ways that we never know who actually was responsible for, giving us a hidden support. But I've been studying some other things, like some ways to access the money in your trust, your Sesticate trust. There's case law that says every taxpayer is a Sesticate trust. The all caps name is actually a trust. That's where they get the money to pay for your Social Security and your food stamps if you get that and stuff like that. That's a whole other subject. But in studying that, the gentleman who teaches that stuff, he files conditional acceptances, which are common law contracts. But what he does is he serves multiple other people as witnesses. AGs mainly is who he serves, but I've been serving people as witnesses of some of my papers here to accelerate the process of finding the hidden support. So when I served those contempt rulings on those magistrates, I had certified return receipt mailings to them, and I put in there that under the mailbox rule, it's called the postal rule, deposit acceptance rule, they were also served as witnesses on several other people, AGs. I sent some to Clarence Thomas, who I think is relatively cool if you study him, and some of the senators, like I think it was Ron Johnson. It was one of the ones who was really really outspoken about the whole vaccine crap. Held multiple summits with people like Peter McCullough and whatnot regarding that. But anyway, I've used that tactic as well to get in. Just to get people's attention on this, so they know that it's not going to be swept under the rug, what's going on and what I'm doing, and what's really happening behind the scenes here, or this every day, right, and really hidden in public, hidden in plain sight, how they're abusing the power. So I'm going to go find some dinner, but I will keep this up, and I will do my part to help us fight against these entities, who are stealing people's children, and putting people in prison for smoking a marijuana cigarette, or you name it. So I appreciate the viewership, any support. You see the X page. I got the Rumble. I think the YouTube didn't work, but I'll upload this later. But I want to get the live stream going here. It seems to be a pretty viable outlet. I noticed some of the previous videos of just me talking with just a screen have gotten some views on Rumble. So yeah, we're working on it, and we're fighting the good fight, that's for sure. So thanks for the support, the viewership, very much. Have a good night.